on political settlement in Syria, challenges and opportunities. My name is Mehmet. I am an assistant professor in the Political Science and International Relations Department in our university. And today we will talk about Syria. Syria is an ongoing crisis in our region. It's a big issue. It started 7 years ago and we are still talking about it, discussing it, and everyone is basically wrestling with how to deal with this problem. It caused so much suffering for all the people in the region, and I guess lots of different actors looking forward to some sort of settlement for this issue. And in this panel we will basically talk about how different regional actors approach this issue, what are their interests, are there any potential areas of cooperation between them, or this conflict is inevitable and this war continue. We will discuss this with our three distinguished speakers, and each of them will address different aspects of this problem. First, we will have Professor Mehmet Akif Okur. He is a chair of the Department of Political Science and International Relations in the Yıldız Technical University, and he has been doing research and publishing and commenting on these issues of foreign policy for a long time. So it's great to have him here. Thank you, Professor. Then we have Professor Ahmet Uysal, who is the director of ORSAM. ORSAM is the Center for Strategic Studies in the Middle East, and he is on his way. We are hoping to have him soon here, inshallah. And finally, we have Associate Professor Mesut Özcan. He is the Director of Diplomacy Academy in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and he served as also the Vice Chair of the Center for Research under the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So it is great to all of them here. Please help me welcome all of them, and I would like to invite all the speakers to this floor and Professor Mehmet Akif Okur will give a talk on Turkey's foreign policy towards Syria.
Distinguished faculty, guests, and dear students. First of all, I want to thank you, ISO, and this significant center to invite me to meet with you on this critical issue. First of all, I want to describe Syria and what does Syria mean today. Because we are talking on Syria for 7 years, and at every level, Syria has changed, and the nature of conflict also has changed. And today's Syria, when we speaking on today's Syria, we do not just speaking on an internal war or a civil war. Syria is a zone. It is a semi-failed state, and it is the place of multiple wars, not just an internal war, not just an internal conflict. When we look to the nature of civil wars, the literature on civil wars, it says to us that if there is an equilibrium or a near equilibrium between the forces fighting against each other, this conflict can go as long as the parties consume their internal resources. But if the outside forces start to intervene by helping sides, this is a significant factor which can increase the time and duration of the civil war. And the Syrian conflict has passed all of those stages. Firstly, it was an internal conflict, and the very reasons, and at least most of the reasons of conflict were internal. And then outside powers intervened the conflict either by helping the rebel sides, opposition sides, or the regime. But now we are at the third level. It means that the real actors of Syrian civil war nearly consumed their internal resources, and outside actors become the real and major players of the Syrian wars. So I think this is a critical issue. So the control of the conflict is not in the hands of the local actors, either the regime side or the opposition side or the rebel side. And another important aspect of Syria as wars is that there are multiple wars. The first one is Syrian civil war, but when we look to the opposition side, we also see divides, and there are multiple groups conflicting with each other. Even today, when we look to Idlib, we see also some clashes between groups. And when we look to other wars, we saw a war against Daesh, and we see also a war of Turkey against PYD, Syrian PKK, and we also see the Israelis' incursion to Syrian territory, attacking Hezbollah, Syrian regime, etc. So Syria is a territory with multiple wars, and Turkey is also side of those wars. At the beginning, Turkey supported Syrian opposition by giving both diplomatic support and becoming part of the international coalition supporting Syrian opposition. But at some critical conjuncture, the very nature of Syrian conflict has changed for Turkey. The rise of YPG as a significant force with the help of the United States, this was an important turning point in the eyes of Turkey to look and to approach the Syrian wars. And another critical turning point was the heinous failed coup attempt. And Turkey, after this critical turning point, decided that Turkey should militarily intervene, directly intervene the Syrian territory to take a hard stand against threats. And at that point, Syrian crisis became the direct national security problem of Turkey, and Turkey prioritized its threat perceptions related with Syria. The first one is the PKK threat and the possibility of a statelet in the northern part of Syria, led by PKK affiliates, PYD and the YPG. This was a national security threat for Turkey. And then Turkey, although not changed its standing related with Syrian civil war, Turkey continued to support Syrian opposition, but changed the level of its discourse. So Turkey in those days does not openly criticize Damascus regime, and there is a difference in the rhetoric and the behaviors of Turkey. But Turkey did not change its stand in principle. So we have an important turning point, another important turning point. It was Turkey's military operation against Afrin. This is significant. Why? Because Turkey showed that it can use force against PKK, but also against the will of United States. This is a critical turning point, and this was the greatest crisis in the relations between United States and Turkey. Maybe we can compare this with Cyprus days, Cyprus crisis days. This is so significant. And it was also different from the previous operation of Turkey towards Elbap, because at that time there was a common enemy, Daesh, but at this time a terrorist group, Turkey says that it is my enemy, and the United States says that no, it is my ally. And Turkey could show the will and determination to do this operation. So this is both. It is important both militarily and politically for the standing of Turkey. And there are also shifting alliances in the Syrian theater, and this situation includes many complexities. Turkey tried to build an alignment, although we cannot call this as a new alliance. We can call it as alignment with Russia and Iran in Astana after Turkey lost its trust to United States and tried to build a new course, at least some temporary settlements to decrease the tensions inside of Syria, and try to find answers whether is it possible to find a negotiated solution to Syrian crisis. And the conflicting zones was part of this deal, and freezing the conflict, even if you cannot solve the conflict, at least you can try to freeze it, and during that time you can continue to speak with each other. This was a great idea, and Turkey also thought that at that time, by freezing the the core of the conflict in Syria, Turkey may use its force to solve its national security problem, the PKK issue. And Turkey also hoped that its alignment with Russia, Iran, and indirectly maybe the regime can open a space for more military operations inside of Syria. And when we look to other part of the equation, we see that Russia is an important actor here, and Russians as a middleman. Russia is part of the coalition with Iran and regime, but at the same time try to show a standing like a trustful middleman. But when we look this portrait from the perspective of Turkey, we see that Russia does not completely align with Turkey in the issue of PKK, but just try to manipulate balances to improve ties with Turkey, but at the same time they do not want to delink their relations with PYD side, and so they hope that during the course of events Turkey would realize that it is impossible to align with United States in Syria, and the only way is to make a deal with Russian and Iranian and Assad regime, this axis. This is the hope of Russia. So they opened the air space, and Turkey's operation started. But again, we started to take messages from the Moscow by saying that firstly you need to have direct talks with Damascus, and also you need to limit your operation. The meaning of those messages is that on the one side Russia opens the way of Turkey in Syria, but on the other side they try to push Ankara and Damascus towards each other to build direct ties, and also the PYD to build ties with Damascus. They say to PYD that even if you don't make a bargain with Assad regime, then you cannot protect yourselves against Turkey, and the United States also could not help you. So the only way is to accept the terms of the Assad regime. And when we look to United States, we see that they do not want a direct confrontation with Turkey, but also they do not want to change their standing related with YPG. They want to keep in control of YPG, but also try to manage their relations with Turkey. And it is not an easy equation. Turkey may wait some time, may freeze the tensions with United States, but it is impossible for Turkey to accept the alliance of PYD, PKK, and the United States. So in the coming months, we can again see a rise of tensions between United States and Turkey, because what United States offers to Turkey, this is the question, especially after the Tillerson, Erdogan and Çavuşoğlu meeting. Everybody is speaking on it, which kind of version can be possible between Turkey and the United States. And there are some rumors and there are some news on it, and United States may offer Turkey a change in the leadership structure of YPG. More local leaders, maybe in the upper strata of the organization, and the terrorists came to Syria from the Kandil, ideologically more motivated ones, would not be in control of the YPG, etc. Those kind of offers they have in their minds. But this cannot solve the problem, and Turkey will not accept such a kind of offering. And there is a timetable we have. One is related with the timing of Afrin operation. If Turkey would finish Afrin operation with a military success, then Turkey would be in a more stronger position to discuss the other part of the problem, other part of the issue. And Turkey also may think that if the United States would not stop the Afrin operation, this can change a debate inside of the YPG. They may ask questions on the value of their relationship with the United States, because they are sending militants to Afrin and they bait help both from United States and other actors, European actors, diplomatic help or international pressure to stop Turkey's military operation at some level. But until that time, they could not achieve this, and at some critical point, we can see an internal debate both inside of this terrorist organization and their relations with the United States. But this also means that those actors will try to increase diplomatic pressure, because United States do not want to lose this terrorist organization. They made investment, and until a point that it would be more costly to keep them than to give them, they will try to try to keep their alliance. So the latest Security Council decision or debates after the latest Security Council decision, we can start to hear some voices saying that this is also related with Turkey's Afrin operation, and Turkey should limit its operation. It means that Turkey should not enter the city of Afrin, and Turkey should be satisfied with just building a kind of security corridor along its borders. And this was also the offer of United States in other negotiations with Turkey. They said that if your problem is just a border problem, a security issue, militants attacking your country from your neighbor, okay, we can build a security corridor and we can solve this. But Turkey's concerns and Turkey's threat perceptions are beyond that. Not just a physical threat causing from the rockets and the other kind of weapons and the entrance of militants to Turkey. This is just one side of the problem. The other one is that the terrorist organization have a government over the civilian population alongside Turkish border, and this creates a legitimacy problem. Terrorist organization tries to use this situation to legitimize itself in the eyes of the international community by showing that I am a reasonable actor and I can govern a civilian population, and I can build alliances with Western powers. So what diplomatically and ideologically PYD wants to use this, and for Turkey the problem is not just limited with the incursions of terrorist organization across its borders, but this issue is also important. So Turkey does not want any kind of PYD presence in its borders. Because the difference between positions are not so close, it is so high, it is not easy to find a stable solution, stable negotiated solution between United States and Turkey, but freezing the conflict is in the best interest of both sides, and with the Tillerson summit we solved this, and in the coming weeks and months we will see what will happen in Syria. And there are also other factors which can affect the Turkey's position in Syria. One of them is the nature of the relations between Russia and the United States. We see an increase in the tensions between two sides, especially after the Deir incident. United States forces bombed the mercenaries of Russian mercenaries, and Russia sent its state-of-the-art aircraft to Himeymin Air Base, and so both sides are sending signals to each other, and whether this tension will continue to increase, or whether will they again make a deal. They made this in 2015 between Obama and Putin, and this deal also changed the balances inside of Syria. Whether will we see such a kind of deal, or we will see the increase in tensions? This is an important thing we need to follow. Because one of the topics of such a kind of deal will be the position and presence of Iran inside of Syria. United States and Israel will demand from Russia the diminishing of the influence of Iran inside of Syria. And if Putin would accept such a kind of deal, then we can see a tension inside of the triangle, Iran, Russia, and the regime. So those days are critical. The diplomatic meetings and burgeons, those are actually critical days and weeks, both for Turkey and for all the other parties related with the Syrian issue. And Turkey, on the one side, started to use military force inside of Syria, but on the other side also demands a political solution for Syrian conflict. Ankara knows that it is not possible to solve this crisis with a clear-cut victory. Neither side can achieve this, but to have a balanced, fair table, you need a kind of balances inside of Syria. And now the opposition is so weak, and on this sends a signal to other side of the table. Regime and its coalition thinks that they can win this war by using force step by step. They thought that we gain a victory in Aleppo, and now we can repeat this in East Ghouta, and now in the future we can achieve this both in Idlib and the other side of the Syrian territory. So this is a dangerous issue. It means that there will be more deaths, there will be more civilian casualties, etc. And to balance the table, Turkey can open a space with Afrin operation because both the national army built by Turkey and they are part of the Afrin operation can find a place, a terrain inside of Syria to organize itself, and so to create a balance and open space for burdens. Those are all among the possibilities. So it is a huge and complex issue. We will continue to debate it, and I am ending my speech now. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Okur. Now we will have Professor Ahmet Uysal. Thank you for coming. He's the director of ORSAM, as I said. He will give a talk about the Turkey, Iran, and the possibility of a strategic relationship. He will give a talk about Turkey, Iran, and the possibility of a strategic relationship in Syria. Thank you.
Inshallah. Assalamu alaikum. Sorry for being late a little bit. I miscalculated the stops. Istanbul traffic, yes. We are not used to this as much in Ankara. Anyway, let me just introduce my center, just 1 minute. We are a Center for Middle Eastern Studies, and we are focusing on mostly the Arab region, because they also have a Center for Iranian Studies at one of my former center. We don't get into the Iran as much, but we are interested in Iran as much as they are interested in the Arab world. Our center focuses on Syria, Iraq, the Gulf region, North Africa, and the Eastern Mediterranean, the Qudus and its environs. Research, training, and publications. We have different areas. Now we have seminars on the Middle Eastern affairs. And we are also trying to expand the center with Arabic, English, and Turkish activities. Let's come to Iran, and Iran is the spoiler actually in the Syrian conflict, in the Arab revolts and Arab democracy. And he thought that they can win the war in Syria, or when the Syrian people rebelled against the dictator. They allowed Iran to spoil this, and they use other means in civil wars, military coups, and other ethnic fightings in Yemen, in Egypt, in other places. But in Syria, it was like a more foreign intervention rather than a civil war. But I see it more like a foreign intervention. Even with the Russians defend the Syrian and Shia militias and Iranian militias against opposition, but they don't defend Iran or Iranian forces against foreign forces like Israel or American attacks. So it means Russia is defending Iran and Shia militias or the regime against its people, against Syrian people, not against foreigners. And they allowed Iran to rule, to go over or overwhelm the Syrian opposition with first with Hezbollah militias, then Iran came itself, and it wasn't even enough. Then the Russians came to the rescue, and it's not clear, of course, if Russia came to help Iranians or to limit the Iranians. That is a big question, and there are some controversies between them. But it's clear that Iran was the spoiler in Syria, and it played a big role to expel the popular demands. And Iran, actually, in my opinion, does not have a plan for a future Syria. They want to press the reset button only. They want to act like nothing happened. They want to reinstall the old Assad regime. If we take a little bit, simplified version, they want to keep it like as if nothing happened. Of course, we cannot pretend as if nothing happened, and there are so many issues. There is a big rebellion, so many refugees. And when I talk to the Iranians, I also say that we cannot act like nothing happened, and we have so many refugees. Even you act like nothing happened, the Syrians will not accept that nothing happened. The refugees will not go. The other rebellions will not stop, the fighting will have different shapes and types if we insist on the reset button. But they have kind of a reset mentality, reinstalling Assad regime as it was in the past. Plus, they don't have the resources to reinstall or reconstruct Syrian scene. They don't have either legitimacy, which is more like a ma'navi, we say in Arabic or Turkish, tools, but they don't have also material tools to. They don't have money. And Russia knows that. Russia knows that very well. That I think in English there is the saying that you break it or take it, and since the Russians now broke it, they have to take it or they have to solve it. Now they see kind of a trap in this, and Russia, that's why knows they need Turkey in terms of legitimacy, in terms of planning, and also plus the other pressures that have from the West, from the Arabs, they prefer maybe Russian presence over Iranian presence in domination in Syria. So it gives us some maneuver, some space for maneuvering. Especially Turkey also realized that this conflict is taking too long. Plus the West and the major powers don't have any plan to stop the bloodshed and the conflict in Syria. So Turkey set on the table. I don't want to take too much of Dr. Mesut's speech, but Turkey thought that this bloodshed should stop, and at least until a solution, possible solution, we have to stop the fighting. And Astana's process started, and Iran joined that process. It was before Trump, of course, unwillingly, maybe forcefully or reluctantly. And then when the Trump came, they really valued this process. They want to go for it. Plus, now they wake up, Iranians. They wake up to the fact that they will not leave Syria. They can let you to destroy the opposition and the revolution, but they will not let you to own the Syrian setting in a way. And now Iran is more open to cooperation, but again the Iranian regime sees it in terms of both ideologically in the Syrian conflict, plus they think strategically if Syria falls, this is maybe the only regime. Syria was the only regime that was pro-Iran before, of course, the fall of Saddam Hussein in Iraq. Now they have big influence in Iran, has big influence in Iraq, but before that it was the only Arab regime that sides with Iran. So they value this as a strategic gain. Plus, Iran wants to expand, even to sell its gas or transport its gas through Syria all the way through Iraq, and of course they have a big say in Iraq right now. And this next elections in May will decide how it's going to shape Hashdi Sha'bi and these Shia parties. They lost some faith. I mean, people lost faith in them. But how it's going to shape, still Iran, I think, will have some serious voice in Iraq. But they see it. They can. I mean, of course, it's combined with the Shia crescent. They thought they can reach to the Mediterranean through Iraq and Syria, sell their gas, or also they use this resistance to Israel and in terms of logistics to Hezbollah and other issues. They want to keep this connection going, and they realized recently that they cannot have the whole piece, whole cake. So they have to share it. But again, with the lack of goodwill, good intention from Iran, as a big sign, it was the Afrin operation. Publicly, they did not say anything, but in the Iranian media, there is a big criticism of Turkey and more or less kind of were not happy. Again, they are repeating that Syria is a sovereign country where there are so many other foreign countries intervened in Syria, but they keep repeating this Syrian sovereignty needs, and Turkey cooperated with Russia more on this side, especially in the air. When they attacked the Syrian air base, Russia stopped for a while the air program, but there's more cooperation between Turkey and Russia than Iran. Iran also, with the cooperation, I mean, this Afrin operation was, I think, a significant sign or evidence that Iran still have big problems or big issues with Turkey, in that when the PYD fighters or terrorists, whatever you call it, they were getting hit and getting weakened. Iran sent, not even the Assad regime officially, they did not talk as much, but the Shia militias that they claim there is some Shia remnants in this territory, and they want to enter Afrin and try to help the PYD fighters over there. And I see it a major sign of Iran did not change as much and try to have control in Syria, almost all, but as we know, in the eastern part of the Euphrates River, Iran, the PYD extended too much to, in a way, it is the PYD is blocking Turkey through, is sieging Turkey from the south, but also going all the way down to block Iran also. But interestingly, PYD, the current PYD administration or leadership, they welcomed this Iranian move with sending Shia militias to the rescue. But Saleh Muslim, that was called the other day and released yesterday in the Czech Republic, he criticized this. I see there is kind of a fracture between the PYD, there are maybe some Kandil side probably have good relations with Iran, in the PYD also, or PKK. Maybe the Syrian side, yeah, I mean, of course, Saleh Muslim is part of PKK and PYD, but he criticized this, you know, he said we don't want Iranian militias or Shia militias in Afrin. I see it is related to the Western affiliated PYD and maybe Iranian affiliated PYD, or PKK that's trying to affiliate with everybody, Iran and, you know, maybe some Gulf countries also in the West. And it is interesting to see this kind of discrepancy between their opinions. And of course, with the Iranian connection, or the Shia crescent, whatever you call it, it is blocking Turkey. If Iran controls the whole south, is blocking Turkey, and we, Turkey will not accept it, will not like it. Either Daesh belt, whatever you call it, that was present in the region, it is again blocking Turkey, or PYD, PKK belt that is trying to be formed by the West, and Turkey is now fighting against it to break this siege in Al-Bab and Afrin. I think there is more cooperation with Russia than with Iran. I think this is the main issue. Of course, Iran also feels that this is a major, Syria is the major battle for them. If they lose, they think they lose Lebanon, they lose Iraq, so they invest a lot into to keep their presence, their influence in Syria. So in that sense, we have a major disagreement with Iran, but also areas of cooperation, especially with at least stopping the bloodshed, and maybe Turkey because Turkey thinks that you know, bloodshed is going forever and we have to stop somewhere, and maybe you know, there was of course the Syrian aspirations, you know, higher, but you know, to be realistic, Turkey you know, show some lenience in Aleppo and in some other places, but at the end Iran probably like that, but they want to give more concessions, more leniency with Afrin. Turkey will not accept it. Plus in Manbij and other places, or in Ghouta, or the regime. The latest that I learned from, you know, some Syrian opposition, which is everybody, you know, to get tired of this. That's why they are pushing hard to maximize, especially the Assad regime, with the support of both Iran and Russia, to finish or to grasp as much as possible, then go to Geneva and you know, have a bigger say on the table, and especially the control on the territory, on the ground, will affect the outcome. And the current debate is with Geneva and with Sochi and Astana, it's coordinated. The debate is on let's have the constitution first and then go for election without transition. That's the possibility that's debated today. You know, without discussing whether Assad should stay or leave or whatever, but if we have a good constitution that also foresees the enactment of elections or implementation of elections, and then we can have a you know, government, we can have a president, we can have a parliament, and the elections will decide. So, but in the Syrian conflict, with we know it, you know, many refugees, even the Iraqi refugees, are not returning so quickly. So the current state, I think Iran is probably will accept it, Turkey will accept it, and also the West maybe accept it. In this formula, of course, the propaganda and also the design of the constitution will make a big difference, whether it's gonna focus on federalism like the mess it caused in Iraq. Federalism, you know, if you have federalism, you can have, you know, more states or more independent autonomous regions than one. I mean, in the Kurdish region in KRG in Iraq, it's like state within a state. But in America, you have almost all, 50 states that are equal. So, I mean, the similar discussion is there, but I think Turkey will oppose this federation formula. And it is also a bad experience with Iraq. That's now people are running away from this idea of federalism and are trying to focus on the citizenship. I think the situation in Syria will emphasize, Syrians will, whether should we focus on the identity, Kurds, Turkmens, or Arabs, or Shias and Sunnis and Alevis, etc., or should we have a equal citizenship in the constitution and everybody is treated equally. I mean, there are some, you know, generally Kurds maybe they admire the Barzani formula, but it failed. I think it is now it is up to the Syrians, of course, how they will design their constitution. And I think Turkey is the only country that really thinks that democracy is good for our neighbors, because we benefited from democracy, and also the Arab, Syrian, or Kurdish and other versions of Syrian people. They deserve to live in a democratic and dignified environment, and they can perform, and we have no problems between the two societies. So it is the future of Syria is very important for Turkey, for everybody, of course, but also Iran. If they want to cut their arm in Syria, or they want to maintain no matter what, or they deal with everybody, or even with Israel, I don't know, but I think it is, of course, the Western, as my last comment, the Western pressures on Turkey and Iran forces them to cooperate, and Turkey, especially with the Erdogan administration, knocked Iran's door several times. You know, let's find solution together. But they thought they won the battle. Probably they won the battle. They lost the war. But now they realized, you know, this was very valuable. Turkey convinced them with the help of Russia. You know, I wish they would come to their senses, and they thought this is a Muslim country, and we have to solve these regional problems in the region. But it now became an international issue. And as the last note, building is always more difficult than disrupting or destroying. You can find the best solution even between Turkey and Iran or others, or Russia, the big powers, because it is easier, destroying is easier. They can disrupt any of the projects, or they have a better chance. So we have to convince also the international actors, especially the West, not to spoil the future of. So we need a common sense, and I think, Turkey has this, Iran, and in the political, the elected leaders, I think they see that, Rouhani and the foreign ministry, but in foreign policy, Qasem Soleimani and Republican guards have more say than the civilian or elected officials and politicians. So the debate is there, but I think Iran finally realized that they cannot have it all. So they are on the table, and hope they can cooperate more. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Uysal. And finally, Professor Mesut Özcan, he will give us a talk about the promise and peril of Turkish-Russian strategic relations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ömer. Being the last speaker, I will be as short as possible, not to make you sleep after a long day. And also, first of all, I'd like to thank Istanbul Sabahat Nizam University, Professor Yarayan, Ömer. So thank you for inviting me and providing this opportunity. So I will mainly talk about Turkish-Russian relations with the focus on Syria, because I think for this reason I'm invited here, this Syria panel. But I will also give a kind of detail about the historical aspect of Turkish-Russian relations, and then why Turkey and Russia are now very much engaged in the conflict in Syria. When we look at the history of Turkish-Russian relations, unfortunately we see a very negative picture for many centuries, not only years and decades. For many centuries the relations between Turkey and Russians were very negative. With the advance of Russians toward the south, the relations between Turks and Russians get deteriorated, and this began in the Black Sea, then on one hand in the Balkans, on the other hand in the Caucasus. And when you talk to Turkey today, there are many people who have emigrated from these territories, from the Balkans, from Caucasus. So the negative history between these two people are still valid to a certain extent. And the same relationship also continued in the recent past as well, but we should also realize that there are also some very good times as well. For example, during the early years of the Republic, when there was a hope on the side of Russians after the communist revolution there, and during the Turkish independence war, they were expecting that Turkey might have a similar structure, similar to those of the Soviet state. Because at that time there were also some parties or some people in Turkey who were favoring a similar approach in state building, and there were signals coming from Atatürk and some other founders of the Republic that Turkey may follow a similar line, especially in this anti-imperialist struggle. For this reason, there were also some good relations as well, and for this period in 1920s, early 1920s, we know that Soviets, at the time, Soviets helped Turks during the independence war by providing arms, by providing some financial assistance as well. So this trend continued for some time, but when it became obvious that Turkey will not have a similar structure to those of Soviets, then we had some problems. And after the World War II, the relations would get very tense with the demands of the Soviets from Turkey in terms of the straits, in terms of some territorial concessions in the eastern part of Turkey. So during the Cold War years, because of these negative memories, Turkey became a member of NATO, and we were on the opposite sides of the international politics. But we also had, as I said, some very positive environment as well. This was during 2000s. After the fall of the Soviet Union and end of the Cold War, during 1990s, we also had very negative relations between Turks and Russians. But beginning with 2000s, with the new Putin administration there, Turkey and Russia developed their relations first in the economic fields, then the good economic relations spilled over to other areas, especially in economic fields, but at the same time in foreign policy issues. We had good relations till 2015, the downing of the Soviet jet on the Turkish airspace. So when we look to the good relations during 2000 and 2015, as I said, these first developed in economic fields, especially in the field of energy relationship, because Turkey is importing huge amount of gas from Russia. Today, Turkey is importing nearly half of its gas from Russia, more than 50%. So Turkey is a big market for Russia after Germany. And on the other hand, during 1990s and also 2000s, there were lots of business opportunities for Turkish business people, especially construction business in the former Soviet space, in Central Asia, but at the same time in Russia as well. So Turkish people had very much construction business, first in construction business and in other areas in Russia as well. So These economic relations were bringing two countries together, and lately the tourism also bringing two countries together. For many Russians, they are very happy to come to Antalya, and they think that Antalya is the capital of Turkey if they don't know much about Turkey, because they only visit Antalya. So and when you go to different cities in Russia, you see direct flights, not only from Moscow but some other cities as well, directly to Antalya. So for this reason, they know Antalya much than other Istanbul, Ankara, or other cities in Turkey. So these type of soft issues in terms of bilateral relations were bringing two countries together. But although we have some close relationships in economic fields and also in tourism, in some other issues, still, even during 2000s, there were some disagreements between Turkey and Russia. In the field of Georgia, for example, during the Russian invasion of Georgia, or in the case of Armenian-Azeri conflict in Karabakh issue, in the Black Sea security. So there are also some disagreements between Turkey and Russia, and Syria is also one of them. In that respect, Syria is not an exception here, and the difference of opinion between Turkey and Russia from the very beginning of the conflict in Syria was very wide, and Turkey was supporting the opposition groups, and Russia is supporting the Syrian regime. And the interest of Russia in Syria and also in the Middle East is a very long one, historical one as well. If you remember the history of, let's say, Ottoman Empire, you may remember that even during the Ottoman times, late Ottoman times, for the protection of Orthodox in the Middle East, Russia, or at the time Russian Empire, was projecting itself as the protector of the Orthodox there. So even in terms of this Russian Ottoman agreements, there were some clauses referring to this issue. For this reason, we can say that there was a Russian interest in the Middle East from the very old times, and this trend continued during the Cold War years as well. And as you all know, maybe, Hafez Assad, the father of Bashar Assad, and also Hosni Mubarak, they were trained in today's Kyrgyzstan. During the Soviet times, they had their training, and they had the pilot training in today's Kyrgyzstan during the Soviet Union. So the very historical relationship, the historical interest of Russia, the Soviets at the time, connecting them to Syria. Today they have two bases in Syria, and in Hmeimim and in Tartus. And beginning with 2015, fall of 2015, Turkey has to take much of Russian presence in Syria into account. Why? Because in the conflict in Syria in 2015, the regime was collapsing. The opposition groups were advancing, and the Russians realized that the regime is collapsing, so they have to come in. Despite the Iranian presence, as it is described by Professor Uysal, despite the Iranian presence there, still the regime was collapsing. So with the Russian intervention, with the Russian air campaign on civilian areas, on many places, on Aleppo and other places, they tilted the balance in favor of the regime side. And then the problems between Turkey and Russia emerged in this respect, because the Russian airplanes were violating Turkish airspace. So this created problems, and then one of these airplanes was shot down by Turkey. And for this reason, beginning with 2015, fall of 2015, Turkey has to take more and more into account the Russian presence in Syria, and for this reason, Turkey is now more and more talking to Russia in the conflict in Syria. As a result of this, there were a couple of months, very tense months between Turkey and Russia in the Syrian conflict. And then, in a gradual way, there were some kind of channels between Turkey and Russia to overcome their differences in Syria. And then, as a result of these contacts, in 2016 August, there were some talks between Turkish and Russian officials to find a formula for overcoming their differences in Syria. And as a result of this, now we had the Astana process and Sochi. Why we had such a process? There are several reasons. First, because of the Russian presence in Syria, as I said. Without taking into account them, without talking to them, you cannot have any influence in Syria, because in a gradual way the conflict in Syria became in a much more international conflict. You cannot have a solution to the conflict in Syria without taking into account the policies of United States or Russia or any other international players, because the longevity of the conflict in Syria is very much relative to the fact that it became very much international. Not only the local players, not only the regional players, but also the international players are there. Because of this presence, it became a very much, let's say, patchwork, many players there, so they have different priorities. So it's not very easy to reach a solution without addressing the concerns of these parties. So for this reason, Turkey started to talk to Russians. And there is also another reason: the process or the talks in Geneva were leading nowhere. Despite having the UN auspices of these talks, with the presence of many different players. So it was a discussion club, but on the other hand, it is not moving forward to a solution, because the regime was not in favor of a solution and the opposition was weak. And on the other hand, there were lots of players, so it is not that easy to have progress with so many players. For this reason, we had this Astana process. First it became only between Turkey and Russia, then Iran is also invited and they joined this process. There was some criticism against this process, why they say that this is a kind of an alternative process to Geneva. But on the other hand, from the very beginning of these meetings, Turkey stated that this is not an alternative to the Geneva process, this is just a kind of complementary to this Geneva process, because in Geneva you cannot have progress on the confliction zones or the ceasefires. For this reason, we should have these talks on ceasefire, on the confliction zones, and we can also continue to have the transition, political transition, and also the settlement in Geneva talks. And lately, in addition to this Astana process, now we have the Sochi gathering, and here the aim of Russia is to have this process under his own control. But on the other hand, Turkey is also trying to connect this issue, these Sochi meetings, all the time to the Geneva process. And lately, after the Sochi talks, Sochi conference, to be corrected to Sochi conference, it is stated that there will be a conference for the constitutional amendment, and the people who will attend this conference, this constitutional writing, will be selected by Stefan de Mistura, by the United Nations. So these two processes are very much interconnected. And in that regard, beginning with 2015, Turkey and Russia started to talk on the Syrian issue. From a Turkish point of view, it's very much related with the fact that without taking into account Russian presence there, without taking into account Russian influence on the Syrian regime, we cannot have a solution. And as it is stated by previous speakers, although Russia and Iran are supporting the regime, they also have different priorities. From my point of view, these are my personal opinions, Russians intervened there to pop up the regime there because the regime was collapsing. But on the other hand, now they are in a position, in a wish to harvest what they have succeeded and to leave the conflict. But on the other hand, Iranians are there. They are bringing more people, they are buying land, they are settling people, they are settling some Shiite militias from other places, not only from Iran, but from Afghanistan, from Pakistan, from some other places. So they wanted to have their presence in perpetuity there. But from other point of view, the Russians, if they have their military bases maybe in Tartus and maybe some other places inside Syria, they are much prone, much eager to have a solution of the conflict because it's very costly. Although the suffering of Russians in terms of human suffering is very less, because they mostly have air operations in Syria, but still it's costing them. And lately, as you may remember, there were also some military operations by the United States in the eastern part of the country, and there were some Russian nationals, Russian, let's say, mercenaries. Yes, they were killed by the American air attacks. So this was affecting Russian troops as well. For this reason, from my point of view, they are in a position to have a solution rather than Iranians. For this reason, it's good to talk to them without having Russians on board. It's not very feasible and very realistic to have a solution in Syria. For this reason, Turkey and Russia are talking to one another, but this doesn't mean that Turkey and Russia are agreeing on every term. As I try to summarize, there are some areas of cooperation, areas of engagement between Turkey and Russia, mainly in fields of economics, mainly in fields of some soft issues like tourism and others, but in many geopolitical issues, in many political issues, there are some disagreements between Turkey and Russia, including Syria. Syria is also one of them. But on the other hand, in order to find a settlement to the conflict in Syria, you have to talk to the real actors on the ground. And real actors on the ground are Turks, Russians, Iranians, Americans, and these are the international players. So there has to be some kind of consultations among these actors in order to reach a settlement in Syria. For this reason, we can talk about some kind of compartmentalization in Turkish-Russian relations. So on some issues we are agreeing and we are developing and we are increasing our contacts, but on some other issues we do not agree a full 100%, but still we negotiate, we engage in order to reach acceptable solutions for both parties. And now with the Afrin operation, we have to talk to the Russians because they are controlling the airspace of Syria. Without having the Russian consent, we cannot carry out an operation inside Syria. And lately, the consultation between Turkey and Russia is resembled or exemplified in the case of Afrin operation. For this reason, in my opinion, the consultation between Turkey and Russia will continue on these military issues to reach a settlement. And it's also very much related with the fact that Turkey and the United States have several disagreements over the solution of the conflict in Syria, especially in terms of PYD, PKK. For this reason, we can expect more of these consultations between Turkey and Russia regarding Syria. But this doesn't mean that everything is agreed between Turkey and Russia. Still some disagreements, but still it's a fact of life that you have to talk to your counterpart in order to reach a settlement, even if you do not agree on the end game or the end result of the settlement. So this is what is taking place between Turkey and Russia in terms of Syrian conflict. Thank you very much for listening. I hope I had a big summary.
Thank you very much, Professor Özcan. And I want to thank all of our speakers for giving us informative speeches about these different options, different possibilities in this conflict. I want to ask a question to all of the speakers first, then I will open the. I want to take the questions from the audience. My question is about the Turkish-American relations. I mean, do you think if the two sides cannot make compromises, it may lead to a certain point at which Turkey may say, like, they burn bridges with the United States? Basically, that's the question, because our politicians say Afrin is the first step, then Münbic comes, then we talk about the east of the Euphrates, and so far, I guess, when we look at the US side, we don't see any statement that would offer something we like. Yeah. But, so do you think where this process would take, and do you think it's eventually lead to a point that Turkey may say, like, we go in our own way, and if you don't like it, it's like burning the bridges? This is what I use the term. So,
I said a few words, so it is best to listen.
Okay, this is the hardball, huh? Okay. Yeah, it is obvious there are serious disagreements between Turkey and the United States, but when we look to the history of Turkish-US relationship, there are also some disagreements as in the past as well. even during the Cold War years, for example, during the Cyprus issue, the Johnson letter, we all know, the Turks don't know all of this. Johnson letter at the turning point in Turkish foreign policy in 1964. And then in 1970s, during the Cyprus issue again, the opium crisis and some other problems emerged between Turkey and the United States as well. We can compare the current atmosphere between Turkey and US similar to those of crisis, but on the other hand, we should not forget that there are still some bonds bringing two countries together. However, we should also admit that the environment, the bilateral environment between Turkey and the United States is very much negative. In order to overcome this negative atmosphere, as you all know, there were visits to Turkey by United States in the last 2 weeks, and the Secretary of State, and also there were also talks between Turkish Defense Minister, also American Defense Minister in Brussels, and also National Security Advisor was visiting Turkey as well. So with these visits, it is agreed that there are some disagreements, but on the other hand, there can be some mechanisms to overcome the differences. As a result of these meetings in March, coming next month, 8 and 9, there will be meetings in Washington between Turkish diplomats and also American diplomats to deal with these issues. And I think there is also some kind of difference of opinions within the American system as well. For example, when you read the comments of Pentagon and also State Department, White House, there are also some disagreements in terms of US engagement with PYD. Everyone is not happy about it, especially people at the Pentagon. Some people like McCurk, they are very happy about it. They thought that this was the only way to deal with IS, so they have to do this, and this was a very beneficial alliance, in quotation mark, for two sides, so they will keep it. But on the other hand, from a diplomatic point of view, when you talk to people in person, they say it was wrong. But in front of the cameras, they say, okay, we have to do this. And in terms of diplomatic contacts, the people at the State Department and some other people admitted it was a short-term alliance between US and PYD, so there has to be some kind of detachment between US and PYD. And as you know, it is declared to the public as well, so there are some proposals on the side of the United States to detach itself from PYD, first beginning at Manbij, maybe to some other areas as well. But we should not have, let's say, expectations of miracles. US will stay in Syria, especially east of Euphrates. So for this reason, there will be some disagreements between Turkey and the United States regarding this issue, but on the other hand, we will not, in my opinion, we will not reach to the position of burning the bridges, but with some ups and downs, this will continue. We will keep our differences of opinion in understanding.
Thank you. Maybe other speakers, please. Professor Uysal.
I think that United States has an Iraqi model in its mind. What was the Iraqi model? In first intervention, United States built a de facto zone in northern Iraq, and the United States influence is not in Baghdad. At this stage, United States invested the Kurdish leadership in Erbil, and then in 2003, after the invasion of Iraq, the entity in northern part of Iraq gained a legitimacy and a constitutional ground. And now, again, United States built a de facto zone in north of Syria, east of Euphrates, and I think that it is not easy in the United States at this stage to have a control in Damascus. So it will take time, but until that time, Washington may try to keep its zone in northern Syria, and so Turkey may try to freeze conflict with the United States, but try to prevent this policy, maybe making some burdens, some pressures, and building some alternative alliances. But from now, it is not easy to foresee the result of this process. But in the near future, it is not easy to see close relations between United States and Turkey. And one factor is also contribute this scene is the internal problems of United States system. Which kind of foreign policy, which kind of vision United States will have in the near future, actually nobody knows, because there is an inconsistency causing from internal conflicts. What will be the fate of the Trump administration, and the factor of Israel within the United States system because of the Trump's position, Russian issue, etc. So there are some source of irrationality from the United States side. I think that the relations between United States and Turkey will be more turbulent in the near future.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much everyone for participating, and thank you very much for our speakers. It's a great to listen.
Thank you, Dr. Omar, and thank you for our panel for a very good discussion on the Syrian front. We just have some appreciation, some plates that we would like to give from SIGA, from the Center for Islam and Global Affairs, for each of our speakers.
Dr. Uysal. Picture for all of us.